And a few days after my surgery, I was still just moved from the ICU, and I was all in a cloud, let's put that, and in terrible pain. Spent most of my days sleeping. I had a massive tumor on my brainstem. It was like 5 centimeters with nerves involved. It was very dangerous surgery. It's a miracle that I'm alive. But I was lying in bed there, sort of in my dreamland. Suddenly I felt this cloud of energy land in my body and go through my body. I was like, what's that? And it gave me strength. And I took my insights and said, well, you know what? If I really understand them, why don't I try and help other people? And I wrote a book about it. And that's my book, Moving Forward, Reflections on Autism, Neurodiversity, Brain Surgery, and Faith. There are areas of functioning, if you'd say, that we need as neurodistinct people to understand ourselves and kind of look at a map of our brains and our skills and say, okay, these areas are strong. These areas I need assistance with. And then we can learn to focus on improving the things that we're having difficulties with. I would always say to start with the senses, because senses are how we process our environment. If our filters are busted, okay, I think particularly with autism, ADHD, and some of the other things, our filters, we receive too much information from the environment, and that gets in our way, and we can't filter them out.
Hello, everybody. Today we will meet with brilliant author, amazing woman, Jacki Edry. Jacki Edry published her first book, Moving Forward, Reflections on Autism, Neurodiversity, Brain Surgery, and Faith in 2021. And shortly after that, she launched her blog. In addition, she enjoys lecturing about neurodiversity and sensory processing to a wide range of audience. Jacki is a neurodistinct, a survivor of a complex brain surgery, which greatly affected her sensory and perceiving abilities. Jacki, I am happy to see you on my podcast. Thank you for accepting my invitation, because what you went through and what you have done, it's amazing. So, could you tell us more about yourself and what brought you to understanding all these very complicated subjects, and even finally to write your book?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here. It's a great privilege, and I appreciate it. So a little bit about me. I started my journey with neurodiversity many, many years ago. When I was in high school, I volunteered with an autistic child. We worked with him in a child-centered educational home program. It was fantastic, and I fell in love with him. And that was my first exposure to autism, which was many, many, many years ago, when autism was still something that was considered to be something very rare. And then I was predestined to be a vet, and I went to college and started pre-vet studies. But then a few years later into my studies, a friend of mine asked me about if I wanted to go work in summer camp for autistic kids. So remembering that lovely boy that I worked with in high school, I said, of course, yeah. And I wound up working there for 3 years and fell in love with the children. And after my second year of being at the camp, I realized that was really my calling, not to be a veterinarian. So I decided to do a thesis to study. I noticed, because we were working summer camp and we were working, doing a lot of outdoor activities and whitewater canoeing and things like that, realized that the need to do stimming, self-stimulatory behavior, tended to decrease with exercise. So I wanted to do some research on that area, and I got accepted at what was called a very well-recommended school at the time, forward-thinking school, which has started the ABA which is a very popular treatment for autism. And I was accepted there to do my research about autism and stimming and exercise and stimming. And then I arrived at the school and realized that it wasn't the kid that I worked with when I was in high school actually wound up in the school in a different state. And he was not in a good place, nor were the children that were at the school. And I realized that behavioral interventions of that type were not beneficial for those kids, in my opinion. And in many instances, it was damaging. So that sort of stayed in my brain. I changed my thesis to working with children in a more natural and child-centered rather than behavioral approach. And then I moved to Israel, finished my thesis, and graduated college, moved to Israel. And a few years later, I find that my oldest son was autistic. So I had been prepared for what to do or what not to do with him. And I started doing advocacy with parents and things like that, and then caring for my son and working with them. And then 11 years ago yesterday, I had an enormous tumor discovered on my brainstem, and I had surgery. And when I woke up, all of my senses were scrambled. And what that did, aside from other disabilities, what that did was that gave me insights as to what I had been observing as a parent and as a professional. I suddenly realized that the same things were happening to me inside of my body. I was not an observer, rather I was experiencing these things firsthand. And that gave me a lot of insights as to how to work with these kids or adults and understanding neurodiversity, the difference between where neurodiversity and cognition meet each other, or behavior meet each other. I was relieved that what I've been doing all those years actually was kind of on target, which made me very happy. And I took my insights and said, well, you know what? If I really understand them, why don't I try and help other people? And I wrote a book about it. And that's my book, Moving Forward, Reflections on Autism, Neurodiversity, Brain Surgery, and Faith. And since then, I've been lecturing, writing my blog, and then meeting people from all over the world to do neurodiversity advocacy.
Thank you, Jacki. And I would like to start from the last word in your book title, start from the faith. Because okay. I think after I heard your story, I think faith, this is what drives you forward. Most important thing.
I can say to you that you're right. First of all, your instinct about it is right. I'm Jewish, and I was not raised in a religious family in any way, shape, or form. I didn't even have a lot of the knowledge, the basic knowledge that many Jews I identified as Jews, but I was not. It was more of a cultural thing and not a religious thing. Faith was not a part of it. But I had a lot of things happen to me along the way that just made me sort of think that there must be a higher power here. There's definitely somebody, just the story that I just told you even, about from the time I was a child, it was clear I was going to be a vet. I worked in veterinary clinics, and then I wound up working with an autistic kid, and then I wound up switching my thesis, and then, 10 years later, my son was born, and it turns out he's autistic. And if I hadn't had all that knowledge beforehand, I would have likely gone down the route of treatment that would have been damaging for him. So that's something in Hebrew we call it hashgacha. It's that God oversees everything, and that there's nothing random in the world. And that's one tiny example of a million other examples of things that happened to me. And when the first time I came to Israel, I was in Jerusalem, and I saw the walls surrounding the old city, out of my mouth comes, "Oh, I'm home. I'm finally home." Now, there was no reason that should happen from a woman from a non-religious background, and why did it even come here? I was curious to come here. And my ears heard what my mouth said, and I said, that's interesting. Why did that happen? Because it was like a subconscious thing that just flew out my mouth. But my life turned upside down at the very moment, and I went back to New York, was in an advertising agency doing all the wonderful things that fresh out of college, woman should do, and said, no. 7 months later, I packed my bags, $500 in my backpack and one-way ticket to Israel, and I've been there ever since. And over the years, I've discovered that Judaism is much more than a cultural thing. It's an actual religion and identity, and specifically in today's climate, realizing that that even if we don't feel related to it, and even if we don't, have any knowledge, other people remind us that we're Jews. So for me, that was one of my decisions to learn more, was to understand that we were part of something much bigger and part of a culture and a community and a religion. And I should learn about it to understand really what that means. And today's climate, where everyone's against the Jews suddenly, we need to know who we are. And I think that gives us a lot of faith. And then I discovered religion. And that gave me the strength to go through whatever I went through, in the sense that life is much more richer, much calmer. And there's a power of prayer. And the interesting thing was that when I was running a student project at the time that I had my surgery, we planned a bat mitzvah for all these underprivileged girls. And I had planned that. And then my tumor was discovered and I had an emergency surgery. And a few days after my surgery, I was still just moved from the ICU, and I was all in a cloud, let's put that, and in terrible pain. Spent most of my days sleeping. I had a massive tumor on my brain stem. It was like 5 centimeters. So nerves involved. It was very dangerous surgery. It's a miracle that I'm alive. But I was lying in bed there, sort of in my dreamland. And suddenly I felt this cloud of energy land in my body and go through my body. And I was like, what's that? And it gave me strength. And it turns out that those girls had done that ceremony, that bat mitzvah that I planned for them.
Yeah.
And at the same time that happened to me, they were all sitting together and praying for me. And that's faith. Faith gives power and meaning, and helped me through my journey.
That's a great story of faith. So let's move a little bit to the subject of our meeting, because I'm like entrepreneur and venture capitalist and advisor. When I started reading your book, and when I was reading your book, I understood that at your book about autism, censoring, I thought it's very far from me. But actually, it started to resonate from the first page, because I understood that a lot of time, like in a business, we somehow get into very similar dysfunction. I don't like word dysfunction, but but physicians call it dysfunctions. And it's a paradox, but a lot of visionary entrepreneurs, they have executive disorders or dysfunctions. And I met a lot of people like these, but they're very successful entrepreneurs. So, and I met a lot of entrepreneurs and founders who just put themselves into their way, or squeezed themselves into the very narrow sensing or censorship of our world. They so much focus on their business. They don't see anything around. They don't know how to listen to people, and they don't know how to correctly communicate. And a huge percentage of entrepreneurs behavior this way, at least in the beginning, having that results in very low emotional intelligence, because they are in the narrow censoring, how to say, I lie. So how do you think your knowledge and your understanding of people behavior, and specifically peoples with some disorders behavior, could add into our understanding and treating such entrepreneurs to become very successful?
Okay. I think you asked a very long question that covers a lot of
it happens very
sectors.
long.
Sure. No, but the question actually is a very simple question, but what's involved in answering that question is actually very, very complex, because it covers a lot of different areas. And the first thing I'd like to address before anything else is what you said as disorder or dysfunction. And I don't like those terms as you don't like those terms. Basically, there's a number of different models that exist regarding what's the world of neurodiversity or neurodistinction or neurodivergence. What neurodiversity means really is that everybody has a different mind and brain, okay? And there's somewhat a norm, but I actually don't believe there's any real normal type of brain function, okay? But there's most people tend to be in some sort of range that is considered to be neurotypical, okay? And then there's people that diverge from that, which is neurodivergence or neurodistinction. Now, those people are often receive diagnoses of things like ADHD, dyslexia, autism, and Irlen syndrome, all different things. Okay,
must have something like this. The dyslexia, yeah.
So, those things can be at times can be a disability, and at times can be a significant advantage. And I think that for a large percentage of the neurodivergent community, and I don't have stats on this, right? But I think we're a large percentage of them that's a combination. So there are areas of functioning, if you'd say, that we need as neurodistinct people to understand ourselves and kind of look at a map of our brains and our skills and say, okay, these areas are strong. These areas I need assistance with. And then we can learn to focus on improving the things that we're having difficulties with by either acquiring different skills or using assistive technology or hiring a team that understands these things that can help you. But those traits or the areas that are problematic. And I think problematic comes a lot with what's important to the person and the quality of life that they're looking for. So for one person to be scattered and just kind of brainstorming all day and not have to accomplish a lot of stuff, that's fine for them. And for another person who's trying to manage a company, that might be an issue. So the first thing is to understand that we don't bind. I don't. Many of people who are on neurodiversity advocates do not bind to the medical model that somebody who has a different brain is deficient or dysfunctional. But they do need supports, because if a person does have a different brain and they don't have the appropriate supports or they don't have the skills they need, then they're going to get lost and they're going to get stuck. So that's the first part of the question.
Yeah, what is the second? Yeah, I would like to ask, because I just got a idea that in your book, you talk a lot about limit of information that people could process. And as you said, this limit, I think, and I remember it was some research about that different people have different limitation of processing of information. And based on this limitation, you can genetically recognize if people good to manage big company or many people, 10,000 people, 100,000 people, or they can manage only 1,000, or they can manage only 100 people, or cannot manage at all. So how they process information influence on their capability to grow like a manager or businessman.
First of all, I don't think brains have plasticity, okay? There are no limits that we don't have limits. We can, brains are constantly forming new connections and we can always inquire with skills. What it does when you're working with brains, they often take a long time. I'm 11 years after surgery, and there are things that my brain is improving on. But even our intelligence or our IQ can change. So there are no limits. What there are,
I mean, limits of processing information, not limits of acquiring of process.
Okay. There are issues with processing. Sometimes we have neurological sensory processing information, okay, which have to do with things like you're not able to read correctly, okay? The letters will blur, or you get overwhelmed, or you get tired, or you get migraines, or the lights irritate you, okay? But you go for an eye test, even though things are blurring out on you, and your eyes are considered to be fine because there is no problem with what's called the hardware, okay? The hardware is fine. The eye doctor won't see anything, but you might have a neurological light processing issue, which is called Irlen syndrome, IRLEN syndrome. And Irlen.com is the website, by the way. That's a very important resource for anybody who has something like ADHD, migraines, dyslexia, things like that, to actually check that out and see if that might be something going on with them. What you see, and the reason I'm mentioning it first is because I have Irlen spectral filters. I'm not wearing sunglasses. These regulate the way my brain processes light. Everyone gets a different color, and it enables me to see and stay focused, and also affects my vestibular and functioning and depth perception, which were all off after my surgery. This was not something I had beforehand, but oftentimes it exists. And almost all of the people who have some sort of neurodistinction, there's a very good chance they might have Irlen syndrome as well. Or sometimes people get misdiagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia, and it's actually Irlen syndrome, and they get colored spectral filters, and it disappears. But doctors will not send you to that because it's in software, not hardware. Same thing goes with auditory processing, where you might not be able to filter the sounds. So if you're in a business room and you're in a meeting and there's background noise and a lot of people talking at once, and there's a meeting you need to see, and there's this chaos, people going in and out of the room at the same time, and then you lose bits of attention and lose words or parts of paragraphs because of that, and you think you're just distracted. But it's not necessarily distraction. It might be auditory processing. And then you might zone out, use your cognition to balance it, and you zone out to try and understand what the person said. And by the time you zone back in, because you figured out what they said, that they've kept talking and you're totally lost. And, 10 minutes later, you have no idea what's going on. So these are very common things that go on with different ways of sensory processing, but there are some tools that can help you. What your brain and your neurology is not regulating, there are tools that can assist you to regulate, and then you will, your functioning or your ability to do things will improve significantly because you have tools to help you with what your brain is not doing naturally. So you need to make the distinction of what's hardware and software, what's neurological and what's mechanical. Okay, and try and work, this analyze which senses are giving you a hard time.
How to understand it? Yeah, how to understand it? Because
you need to.
Because for me, I understand this through my feeling that somehow when I'm out of zone of my comfort, it means neuroplasticity of my brain isn't there yet. So I have to develop my brain. But when I feel, so what kind of feeling tells me that, okay, this is a problem, this is what I am not ready to do, this is what I am not ready to process. How to recognize these and overcome it.
Okay. So as either a manager or as a person, okay? So a manager can be recognizing issues with your employer, your employee, that they're having problems paying attention, okay? Or as a person, who's feeling uncomfortable, or find you're scattered, or gets headaches all the time, or saying what all the time because you're missing part of the word. Like this, all different things. What I would suggest to as an individual is, if you're feeling, try to understand yourself. Make lists of the things that get in your way. Okay, and once you understand what are the things that bother you, then you can try and seek out the things you need to assist yourself. And I would always say to start with the senses, because senses are how we process our environment. And if our filters are busted, okay, I think particularly with autism, ADHD, and some of the other things, are filters. We receive too much information from the environment, and that gets in our way, and we can't filter them out. Like most people considered in the neurotypical range have what's called an automatic filter, okay, in their brain. So when there's background noise or stuff going on and you need to focus on something, your brain will say, this is relevant to what and it's not something you're conscious of, right? But your brain says, this is relevant, I'm going to focus on this, and this is irrelevant, I'm just going to ignore it.
Yeah.
But people who have, any of the things I was talking about before, the diagnosis, ADHD, autism, a lot of times those filters are deficient or busted or whatever. And so we get this influx of too much information and varying senses. And that can cause us overwhelm. It can cause us to be annoyed, and it could cause us attention issues. So the first thing I will suggest is, if there's any issues going on or any challenges, if the person feels uncomfortable, to try and figure out what's going on with each one of the senses. Okay? Vision is 70% of our sensory input. So the first sense I would start with is vision. And if you think something's going on, like I said, migraines, reading, tired after 10 minutes of reading, any of those things, I would check Irlen. If you have light sensitivity, that can cause havoc. And that also causes too much blood flow to the brain. And when that happens, then all the other senses get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
But when you calm down the visual sense, the other senses can calm down as well, and they'll be more focused. And actually, there's been studies done that show if people who have Irlen start wearing colored filters, a lot of times they've been diagnosed with ADHD, and then they go and do retest, and they're in the normal range. And the medical doctors, because these are not measurable, these things, doctors will not refer you to do this, nor will people during a diagnosis. So I would check your senses, okay? You can make a list and check your visual, your auditory. And if you're working in a work environment, let's say, and you're sitting next to the cafeteria, and the smells are disturbing you, and you don't like them, or somebody has perfume you don't like and it gives you a headache, that might ruin an entire productiveness for an entire day. So a boss, when they're hiring an employee, can ask certain questions that help, sometimes just changing the way the person's sitting, or the lighting in the room, or the fact that the auditory environment might totally change the person's ability to be productive in a work environment if there are simple changes and adaptations that are made. So a boss can sort of do a little sensory profile for a new employee and say, hey, how do you feel about these things? And does it bother you to sit next to the cafeteria? Can you work and function in an open workspace, or do you need a quiet place to function? And all of these things will help improve productivity if the person is seated in the right environment. So that's the first thing. I got a little distracted, so I'm going to probably need you to go put me on target. But the other thing I didn't answer was a part of your initial question.
Let's back to
hyper-focus, and I do want to get back to that. There's many neurodivergent individuals, the very thing that can cause a havoc or affect their productivity is their two things. One, they get distracted and they get on a train of thought, and they can get locked on a train of thought. And there's a term, hyper-focus, which we call it. And you can get so into that niche that kind of, even sometimes the world will kind of disappear around you, you know?
Yeah, this is specifically for people with ADHD. This is what happens. Or they cannot focus at all, or if they focus, they
do both
focus
at the
dramatically.
same time.
Yeah.
But so what do you do with that? And I think what you do with that is the things that you can't focus at all, you find the tools to help you focus, organize your senses, use assistive technology, or if you're working and you have support staff that can organize your time and the things you're having. You know, time management is a big issue with people who ADHD or any kind of neurodivergence, because we get locked. I can sit down to write something at 11 o'clock in the morning, have a list of things that I need to do, and suddenly I realize it's got dark out and I forgot to eat and drink and go to the toilet, and that's the hyperfocus. But the hyperfocus,
it's a flow stage. It's called flow stage.
Yeah, flow. Now they call it flow, hyperfocus. It's called whatever it is. That leads to the greatest creativity and discoveries. So it's a significant advantage. So what you need to do is kind of you find the ways to manage your time and accommodate for what you need to accommodate for, and then you enable that most of the time you can be in your flow state and get help to deal with the things that are less relevant for you, or that you're less productive at or less successful at, because your brain is wired differently. And there are ways to get around the things to help you with the things that, limit your productivity or your overall sense of well-being, and try and organize your time and your environment so that you can spend most of the time doing the things that you're best at. So I wouldn't go to the place where you're talking about, well, this person can't manage 1,000 people. You might not have the best managerial skills, but you can learn what you need and use the technologies to help you organize and the staff to help you organize, so that you're focusing most of the time on that. And the people that do those things better are going to be handling those issues, or that staff or that project. And if you try and spend most of your day doing things that your brain is not naturally wired to do, you're probably going to not be very happy, and you'll be less successful. So you need to sort of find the balance, but it's definitely findable. And again, as you organize senses, a lot of the things that distract and annoy you will disappear or certainly improve significantly.
Yes, so it's a big walk. It's a big walk on yourself, on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
What I found that people with some functional disorders, and if they are visionaries and managers, executives, they are brilliant in delegation, because they cannot do it by themselves. They cannot plan by themselves, so they delegate everything. They are mastering delegation.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's actually that. You know what? If they find a good enough team to do that, and they can spend their day dreaming up the big things. I think most visionaries realize that, and where they get in trouble is when they try and do everything, the things that they're not wired to do, or not that they can learn certainly, but it's not going to be something they'll enjoy, and they might not be that good at it. So the art form really is to find that team or those sports, or the technologies or whatever it may be, to have each person be in the environment and then able to focus most of their energy. I mean, we'll have to do stuff we don't like to sometimes. Mm-hmm. But if we can focus most of our time doing the things we enjoy and excel at, then everybody will be happy and everybody will benefit, because productivity improves when you're doing what you're naturally wired to do. And, there are people that just love sitting and playing around, let's say, with numbers and every little detail, and that's their strong point. And there are other people that, like to sit in a room and dream up stuff all day long. And to run a successful company, you need all of those people. And you try, fit the task to the natural abilities and likes, not only abilities, because sometimes we can do things well and we hate doing them. And that's not going to cause, a productive team or a happy team. One thing that I think a lot of neurodistinct people there are a couple areas where we really interfere with our ability to get accepted into work environments or to stay in work environments. And one of them is the interview process, and the other is, working in teams or the co-work culture and things like that. And I think that's one thing that really needs to be addressed for any company to succeed. So there are many, many, many talented neurodivergent people, autistic individuals, or that sometimes, as you said, they're so into their niche and they're extremely good at their niche. But let's say they're not particularly sociable, so they're not going to fit in the social climate of the company, or they have serious difficulty in interviews. They get overwhelmed, they get stressed, they don't know, they're going to be asked of them. They're excellent about answering questions when they have time to think about it. So you might want to give them questions beforehand so that they can know what to prepare for, and then they will answer the way they should. So these sort of things, actually making those accommodations at the beginning of the interview process and looking sometimes more at the skills of the person, and then creating teams that they can work at that most suit their abilities. So if the workspace, the management and the HR people were more aware of neurodivergence, and they try and figure out what the person needs for accommodations, and then they can find the right task. You don't necessarily want the person that's very rigid and detail-oriented. That person might not be the best fit for managing a large team. They may have the skills, or they may not, but you want to assess that with the person and see what they feel is most suited to their natural abilities. And the other thing is that's important in workspaces, people process information differently. So when you're having, some people who are excellent at their job, but if they have 4 meetings back to back, the production is going to go right down the drain, or they have auditory distraction. And so if you give them meeting notes after, they can't take notes and listen at the same time. So if you give them written meeting notes after, or communicate by email instead of giving a long list of oral instructions, the productivity of that person is going to go way up, rather than putting them in a situation they would need to rely on the senses. So there are all these type of things that can be done to help integrate neurodistinct people in the work environment, and then everybody benefits because they have their special skills. They didn't want to get lost because of technical difficulties.
Yeah, and very important to think how to manage their task, because there are 3 types of management of doings. It's a task management, it's time management, and recently appeared so-called energy management. For myself, I found that if I put task management, I cannot.
If you put what?
Task management, I cannot cope with task management. But what I like the most, the energy management. Mm-hmm. So I just identify when I feel the best of the high energy to do different things. And I do these based on my energy profile during the day. So what do you think about these in application to people with such disorders?
Again, I want to get away from the medical model.
Yes, medical, away from medical, not disorders, but
it's neurodistinction.
Distinctions,
and absolutely. I think, if a person's in flow, and I know lots of people, myself included, that could get into flow, hyperfocus or whatever, and sit down and work for 10 hours straight and produce more. And those 10 hours, and a regular person, neurotypical, would produce in a week. And then the next day, I might get up, or this could be a minute or hour thing too, and I can't do anything. Like I have brain fog, right? And I think that the employees need to understand that about themselves and utilize the time when we've got that hyper focus. And management needs to understand that that's the way that person's brain works. And if they give them the permission, the room to work differently, or maybe they're going to sit they work better from home, and maybe they work at 3 a.m. That's their, their hour. Now, lots of people that do that and have the end result be more important than the process. Okay.
Right.
And if managers will recognize that, that will help everybody. Lots of people I know, the minute they have to work in a crowded, I know myself, I could sit at home and I would, because of my auditory processing issues, and I had my left vestibular nerve and auditory nerve was damaged in my surgery, and I have slight hearing loss in my right ear. So my hearing is not great, and certainly in a noisy environment. And sometimes people put music, and so with my auditory stuff and my visual stuff, 2 hours in a workspace with artificial lighting, I'm usually going to feel exhausted, dysregulated, and I'm not going to be able to do what I need to do. Whereas if I sit at home and work, typing my laptop on while sitting on my bed, I could sit for 10 hours straight, and I can do lots and lots of stuff. So again, it's the conversation between the employer and the employee, and not to do that. Oh, other employees won't like it, so we're not going to let you do that. Which is what's happened to me many times. And that's unfortunate. I think everyone needs to have their own relationship with their HR department, and no one else should be seeing or checking why that particular employee works the way they work or the hours or places. The end result is what's the clue, or what's important, and not the process. And again, any assistive technology that the employee needs, whether it be for time management, which is a biggie, or whether it be for any other thing. It can be, there's so much technology out there. The employers should take care of their employees and get them whatever software they need, or help them organize themselves, or whatever training they need to learn to use as many different ways to assist themselves to be as productive and comfortable as possible. And if they're comfortable, then they're going to be more productive and be happier, and so on and so forth.
I would call it these personalized management, and I think it should be everywhere. It happens for high-level employees.
Exactly.
Who are high value, but I think it should be introduced in all levels of employers.
Absolutely.
To uncover or unleash the full potential of these employees, and it doesn't happen today.
Well, I do see that there is a trend that people are starting to realize that it's definitely worth investing in neurodivergent individuals and having part of big companies. And there's a company that I'm sitting on their co-production board for the last couple of years. They're called Abilities. They're sitting in England. In the UK, there's a lot of stuff going on as far as I can see, where they do actually help integrate neurodivergent individuals into the workspace. So they do assessments and sensory profiles and all different kinds of things because these big companies have realized that there's so much power to be that would be beneficial for their company if it was there, and it's getting lost because of these technical difficulties. I think it's like 1 in 7 or something about that. 1 in 7 are diagnosed with some sort, in the UK, are diagnosed with some sort of neurodivergence, and it's probably a lot higher than that because most people aren't diagnosed. And what does that mean? Like I said, autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and Irlen syndrome, and there's all kinds of different sort of emotional things that can be as well. That's just a few of them. Dyspraxia, there's a long list, and that's a huge part of the workforce. So if there's more awareness, then, like I said, work environment, atmosphere, production will all be better. People's needs are accommodated to, no matter where they are in that hierarchy.
Jacki, thank you very much. And I'm really happy to have you on my podcast. And I recommend all our audience who are interested to learn more about what we were talking about. I recommend to read Jacki's book, Moving Forward, Reflections on Autism, Neurodiversity, Brain Surgery, and Faith. And Jacki, good luck with your very important journey. And I expect to have more books that will teach us how to overcome the problems of neurodiversity. That's not a problem. To make neurodiversity work for us.
Exactly. And my book is one part of what I do, but actually I have a blog. There's only a limited amount of information you can put in a book. So I do have a blog and a newsletter that I put out regularly, which can help people. And I do also presentations and lectures. So I'm happy. I love connecting with people. Feel free to reach out with any questions, and I'll try and help you along the way.
Yeah,
that's what I do.
I see your website address, jackisbooks.com on background. So I invite everybody to visit jackisbooks.com.
Thank you. It's Jackis books,
which
is different. It's spelled a little different than most people because my parents did not put an E at the end of my name.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jacki. Have a great day. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.